Welcome to the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.
And this is going to serve as our off-season preview episode of the Baltimore Orioles. And what an off-season we hope it's going to be, fellas. Because for those that haven't listened to the podcast in the past, the off-season we do go a little bit dark. Like we try to have an episode here or there, but if nothing's really going on, there's really no reason to have an episode. And I'm not sure how active the Orioles are going to be this winter. So we'll see what happens.
You do know
I don't
how
think
active
very active.
Yeah, you know exactly how active they're going to be.
I mean,
don't want to.
We could be pulling an emergency pod for a Trey Mancini extension. Would that be emergency pod worthy? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it'd be pod worthy.
I would say, yeah.
Okay. So there you go, folks. That's what you can be kind of looking out for. If Trey Mancini signs an extension with the Orioles, you will get a Warehouse Podcast episode.
How about we set a threshold in terms of like monetary value of a transaction, which triggers an emergency pod?
Oh, wow. Okay.
And like given who the Orioles are, it might be like if we spend $12, emergency pod.
Yeah.
Right.
If there's news of a new concession stand at Camden Yards, emergency pod.
Yes.
The threshold could be quite low. I don't know. But yeah, I mean, you know it when you feel it. When you hear the news, you know that's emergency pod worthy. That's the only thing I can say.
Okay.
Right. I think that's a good point.
Yeah.
Big trade. You guys just can't commit.
Look, man, the offseason is that's when we get our R&R a little bit here.
Right. Massage the vocal cords a little bit, right?
Exactly. We build back up all of that like confidence that we lose throughout the summer as an Oriole fan. That's what the winter is for.
The unfound confidence.
Exactly.
Just to have it ripped away next season again, right?
Yep. One game at a time.
In May.
Yeah. This is going to serve as our off-season preview. Sort of a disclaimer here at the beginning. We do know that CBA negotiations are ongoing at the moment, and as it stands, the league year ends, I think, December 1st, or maybe the league year ends at the end of the World Series. I'm not totally sure, but I do know the CBA expires on December 1st, and then starting December 2nd, like if there's no deal, then the offseason just is essentially on hold. So everything we say here, that if we say any dates or whatever, they're kind of all in accordance with things going smoothly, which they very may well not. And that's almost the expectation, is they will not go smoothly. Also, if any rules get changed through the CBA negotiations, obviously we're not privy to any of that information. Like we don't have the inside scoop there. As we record this, it's late October. The playoffs are like ongoing. The World Series is coming up. No news is going to break during this time period anyway. So kind of keep that, in mind if you hear this, after December or later in November, things like that. So with that in mind, let's get into talking about some off-season stuff happening or potentially happening with the Baltimore Orioles. And I think we kind of want to take like a 10,000 foot view for a moment and just sort of talk about like what sort of actions do we think the Orioles are going to take this offseason. And I think the first one is going to be trades, because we know free agency, that can always be kind of a difficult conversation for Orioles fans, Orioles front office. So maybe let's start off with trades. Do we think the Orioles are going to be heavily involved in the trade market this offseason? Jesse, maybe I'll go to you first.
No. I mean, I could have said yes if you hadn't included heavily.
Okay. God.
Okay. Sorry.
Okay.
No, I mean,
to what extent?
Right. To the extent that the Orioles are involved, I think they are going to be trading to be dealing away.
Sellers,
I think the Orioles, they'll be sellers, right? I think there could be an Adam Plutko type of situation where the Orioles go acquire somebody to this caliber, but it'll probably be for cash considerations or something like that. So otherwise, the Orioles are going to be sellers. We'll talk about the trading block coming up, but I could see one pretty sizable trade happening this offseason.
Okay.
I could see that.
Good little what's that? A tease for later in the episode. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Eli, are you seeing things kind of similar, at least from like a buyer's perspective for the Orioles? Like the only way they'll be buying is on like a very low risk, like bullpen guy.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that there's really no reason, if you're, Mike Elias in the front office, there's no reason to like hedge bets on any one prospect. And so at this point, like you just want to maintain everything that you have, all the talent you have in your system. And yeah, you're not going to be like dealing away prospects to go acquire some, big name MLB current player. So I definitely expect it to be quiet. Like you guys said, we might be sellers. I think like probably on a pretty small scale. Like I do not think that a Mullins is going to go. I do not think a Means is going to go, anything like that. But yeah, some small scale trades to sell off some moderate chips. I can see that.
Yeah, I think that sounds right. Something that's going to start to get interesting for the Orioles, maybe not this offseason, but potentially like during next season, is going to be like they're going to have a glut of minor leaguers that are going to be like Rule 5 eligible at a certain point. And it gets to a point where there's enough interesting names, but not enough spot on the 40-man roster to fit them all. And from that point, you've got to kind of start to deal those sorts of players. The Yankees do this a lot, where they deal like semi-interesting guys that are about to be Rule 5 eligible, they can't fit, and they get some interesting reliever or whatever. I don't think the Orioles are quite to that point yet where they have enough interesting players and not enough 40-man roster spots. So we're not quite there yet. Maybe something to look at during the 2022 season. But yeah, I mean, the Orioles, it just doesn't make sense for them to package up any sort of like interesting prospects at this moment and try to go get some veteran pitcher or even a veteran whatever, because they're not at that point where they're a player or two away. They're like 6 players away. So yeah, I think that totally makes sense. The free agent market could be a little bit different. Eli, do you see the Orioles being like pretty active in the free agent market? And maybe to what extent? Are they going for the big bucks, or is it more some stopgap moves there?
Yeah, I don't think there are any deals coming out of the Orioles front office that hit, I was going to say double digit, but it's like double digit millions. So it's like 8 digits, I think. That's what I'm trying to say. Nobody gets $10 million from the Orioles front office.
Wow. Okay.
That being said, I think we're more active than we were last year. Like I expect something better than,
Like
contingent deals for Wade LeBronc and Harvey and Felix Hernandez. And yeah.
Okay. Yeah. I was reading, Rock Kubaco had something that basically talked about how active the Orioles are going to be. And he said essentially like the only big money that's going to get spent this offseason by the Orioles is potentially a Trey Mancini extension. So Rock tends to kind of know what's going on there. So if that's what he's saying, I think that sounds about to jive with what you're getting at there. Jesse, are you of a similar mind?
Yeah, I am. I don't believe even that's going to happen, but yeah, I think that, yeah, I agree that nothing over 10 million. And I mean, I'd be impressed if it was anything over 5 even. So,
okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, that sounds totally on brand with what the Orioles have done the last few years. I'm thinking this may be the last year that is like the thought process though, going into the offseason. I'm hopeful that like 2022 is going to be the year we start to see some of like the product of building up these draft capital and getting these interesting young players, and maybe we start to seem interesting. And then in 2022, they start to support that with some financial investment. All right. So the Orioles, I think I kind of just sort of hinted at my thoughts here on this next question we have, which is how much should the Orioles be focusing on the short term and the long term? And we kind of piggyback this. To what extent will the Orioles be able to effectively address both in this offseason? I definitely think the Orioles, as far as like making moves in the offseason, they're going to be focused more on the short term, which is like filling gaps. And that's kind of separate from like the organizational philosophy of like, accruing interesting talent and all that, because I think the Orioles, movable players that you could trade for interesting prospects are pretty limited at the moment. So I'm not sure how much they can do via trade to sort of further bolster their future prospects. Jesse, you kind of seem to half agree with what I was saying there.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. I think every offseason is going to be focused mainly on on the short term and just filling out the rotation predominantly. But yeah, I mean, I think ideally, uh, if the Orioles found that the best time to move one of their players with a lot of value or relatively a lot of value on this team was the right time. Those players, when they move them, they're of course thinking about long-term return for those players, not short-term. So, but barring a trade or the Orioles trading one of their key talents, that's not going to happen, and it's going to be focused on the short term.
Okay, cool. Eli, are you what are you thinking?
Yeah, I fully agree. But I just want to clarify, like, Jess, you don't think we're going to trade one of those key talents, do you?
Correct. No.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
I could just I mean, it's hard for me to see it, but I could see it happening.
Yeah.
But I don't think it will. And it's not consistent with what the Orioles and Elias have seemed to have done in the past recently. So
okay. Yeah, I'm fully in agreement. I think that really the only things that happen this year are, there's some 40-man turnover that we're going to talk about in order to bring in some slightly new faces onto the 40-man roster and get rid of some of the old. And I think that beyond that, like, we might lose some familiar faces due to some non-tenders, but I do not think that there's really going to be like any major overhaul in the outlook of the Orioles next year. They're just going to bring in more stopgaps and just kind of plug holes as they can and as cheaply as they can.
Whoa, man, that is getting my juices flowing for the hot stove. Plugging gaps, just surviving. That's what we love about off-season baseball.
It's what we do. It's what we do in Baltimore. Survive.
Yeah. That's true. We're a blue-collar town, sort of.
Even when the Orioles were like winning, like under Buck Showalter and stuff, I mean, we still kind of we did go get Ubaldo, but we did a lot of this patchwork band-aid kind of roster moves and stuff like that. So it's been with us for a while.
I mean, the Chris Davis deal was not, it was our guy already, but that was the big money.
The difficult thing is, people always talk about the Orioles don't like to spend on free agent pitching. And well, the last two times we did it were Ubaldo and Alex Cobb.
Right.
Two like $50-60 million deals that were just outright terrible. Just terrible.
Yeah.
Well, we have to do it well. I mean, that's the other
part. Right. And
yeah,
I do trust that Elias will be better than Dan Duquette, but I do not I don't know. We have a bad track record is what I'm saying.
Well, yeah, and shopping for pitching like in that like section of free agency is always dicey. Like, yeah, when you go really high end, you're typically getting a really good pitcher, so he's going to be really good. And then when you go really cheap, it's like low risk and it could work out. It's the middle part where you're giving like $12 million a year out. It's like, I don't know.
Right.
All right, well, let's talk about front office priorities. I think we're probably all going to have the same answer here, but what is the Orioles' most urgent need this offseason? Eli, you're rubbing your head. I think we know. What is your answer to that question?
I just have to think so hard. I think maybe the starting rotation.
Oh, okay.
I think
that's reasonable.
That's all I got. Get us some pitchers who can throw 100 innings.
That would be nice. That would be really nice and can get out major league hitters.
Right.
Jesse,
weird.
Similar thought there.
At least some of them. Yeah. Yeah, definitely. I mean, nothing is even comparable. Like the other Oriole needs are not even comparable to the Orioles figuring this rotation out. They're not.
No, I mean, it's totally fair. The pitching was a complete disaster this year. And I mean, it was John Means, Matt Harvey, and then that was really it. Bruce Zimmerman pitched at the beginning of the year and the very, very end. They need more arms. So yeah, starting pitching, it's a clean sweep there. Long term though, I mean, is that kind of the same thing? Do you think we need to, if we're going to sign somebody to a multi-year deal, theoretically, do you think a pitcher is like, that's the person to go for?
I think not at the. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead, Jess.
I was just going to say, I think not at this time. I think that if you're going to sign a pitcher to a multi-year deal, you might as well wait till, closer to when you're ready to compete than, just signing him and then having 2 years where the Orioles are not competitive. We're paying this pitcher a lot of money. And yeah, that doesn't seem to make sense in my mind.
Okay. Eli?
Yeah, I think that if you're going to sign somebody to a multi-year deal, I think that the best place that you could kind of inject that immediate stability and such would be on the middle infield. That being said, I think part of the reason I think that is because we still aren't fully sure what we have in the way of our starting pitching in the minor leagues. I think that a lot of the AAA to quadruple A guys that we saw this year, we might not have as much as we thought, but there's still like a Bradish, Branovich, Grayson was, like he could theoretically not be the ace we thought he was. And so there's still time for some of these guys to shake out and so we can have a better evaluation. In terms of middle infield, we do have Westberg. Joey Ortiz showed a lot of good stuff last year. There are some prospects, but I think there is almost definitely going to be space for somebody in free agency, regardless of, best case scenario with all those middle infield prospects.
Yeah, I mean, that's something we're definitely going to touch on here in a little bit. There are a lot of tantalizing middle infield options. I would love to see the Orioles get an infielder of some kind in free agency this offseason. That is like a bona fide, major league quality type. They got Jose Iglesias a couple years ago. They got Freddie Galvis last year. I think another guy in that vein. So I'm not so sure they need to go multi-year on an infielder.
Well, yeah, I'm not saying they will do that, but
right.
I'm saying as a long-term need, I think that's the one.
Yeah,
right.
No, that is true. Because shortstop's always so fickle. Like Ryan Mountcastle was drafted as a shortstop, and he's very far from that at the major league level. And I think it sounds like Westberg is probably he might be able to stick it short. Gunnar Henderson doesn't sound like he's going to stick it short. So that is a good point that if the Orioles think like we don't have the guy, maybe we go throw a bunch of money at somebody this offseason. I think that it could be interesting.
I would still expect that to happen I don't know, next year at the earliest though. We're not like I already said, we're not shelling out big money on any middle infielder this year.
Okay. All right. That could be a controversial statement for a lot of
I know
people.
A lot of people are going to be really sad when the Yankees sign Carlos Correa for $250 million, but that's probably what's going to happen.
Yeah, we were all texting the other day, and I think I said it feels almost like a guarantee that they're going to go get him because they need a shortstop. Like Gleyber Torres is not the answer, I don't think, and Correa is just so good and still so young that I think it's going to be tough to pry him away from the Yankees.
I think a lot of people have been making the argument that Corey Seager would fit better with them, just because he's a little bit more contact oriented and he's a lefty in a very right heavy lineup. But
that's a good point.
Semantics.
Right. Well,
they're going to sign a shortstop for a lot of money.
Carlos Correa is back in the Orioles.
Back in Baltimore, baby.
He's available.
Yeah. All right, let's talk current state of the Orioles 40-man roster, because there's actually been a few moves recently that the Orioles announced. Is this list here you've got, Eli, all the guys they just DFA'd or that could be DFA'd?
No, that I think could be.
Okay.
The guys that in literally yesterday and today, the Orioles outrighted Austin Wens, and then they also outrighted Pat Valleca, Thomas Eshelman, and Connor Wade.
Okay, cool. So that gets us to where the 40-man roster currently is, where if you exclude 60-day IL players, it's at 35. but if you include them, the roster would be totally full. Now the 60-day IL does disappear, I think, after the World Series is over, but then also players hit free agency. So like Fernando Abad will hit free agency, Matt Harvey will hit free agency. So I think that leaves us at about 2 open spots on the 40-man roster.
I think right now with the guys on the IL, we actually have 41. So I think that would leave us with 1 open spot on the 40-man.
Okay. Yeah. So yeah, it's tight. It's tight right now, which is, I mean, that's normal for the season ending. It's normal to have very few 40-man spots open, but the Orioles do have a bunch of players on there that I think are reasonable enough to say could be DFA'd at some point if the Orioles wanted to make room to add some players who we're going to talk about in a moment. So Eli, do you kind of want to rattle off who you think the Orioles could DFA and maybe why?
Yeah, I mean, I kind of looked, it's kind of a crappy thing, but you always kind of look towards bullpen arms. And, you know, somebody like an Eric Hanhold, a Brooks Kriske, like Isaac Mattson came up and really looked pretty terrible this year. So you know, if you try to remove a reliever prospect from your 40-man, there's probably a pretty low risk that somebody's going to try to pick him up. Even like Spencer Watkins started to fade down the stretch. We saw Joey Crable. I thought he looked pretty good, but Tyler, you mentioned his name as somebody just because he's an older reliever, you know, it's like 30 years old. I'm not entirely convinced that like even I don't know. I've been kind of back and forth on Nick Chufo. Maybe he could just be a good, like, you know, you usually keep at least 3 catchers on the 40-man. That's usually the number. You've got 2 on the 26-man roster and 1 backup who just kind of hangs out in the minor leagues. I really don't have much of a book on Chufo, but removing him just because, as we'll mention later, like Brett Cumberland needs to be added to protect him from the Rule 5 draft. You know, we have some catchers in the upper minors that people tend to like throwing to, it sounds like. Maverick Hanley's coming up. So, you know, we have some kind of high level, like just fine for a backup catcher to be added to the 40-man. So if we needed to clear space, I think Chufo could go too.
Yeah, I think that those are all valid. And I think the Kribel name I brought up sort of for the same reason that you were mentioning some of the others, just that he is, like you said, an older, not older, but like almost 30-year-old reliever. Like those guys tend to be not expendable, but easier to maybe slip through and get back to AAA or something like that if you wanted to do that. Some other names I think could be in the conversation if they want to make room are Kelvin Gutierrez could be there. We know the bat. For sure. We know the bat is not quite up to major league standards. Nice fielder, but if you're only OPS plus like 80, it's not really going to get the job done. I think Richie Martin is on the precipice a little bit just because he's had a few chances now. He's had injuries, so it's not been, you know, him at his absolute best. But, you know, look, he's about to be 27 years old. This isn't like a young prospect we don't know anything about. We know he can't really hit a whole lot. You know, there's some holes in his game that I think if he was some Gold Glove type of defender, that'd be one thing, but he's not quite that. So I think he could be in a little bit of trouble there. Yeah, I
think that Martin spends most of this year as a utility infielder with the Orioles, and this is like his last shot. That's the way I'm looking at it. And, well, I might not even say most of this year because there are other guys kind of knocking at the door, a la like Terran Vavra and some guys like that, you know, who do kind of need to make their way up. Ryan Bannon, it's about time for them too. So
this is why I was going to say I found it interesting earlier when you guys mentioned that we would go sign an infielder. I just feel like the infield is so packed with guys that the Orioles want to figure out and kind of understand a little bit more. And I wouldn't be surprised if they just, you know, continue with the guys that they have and just see how it goes.
That makes sense, but I think that's kind of taking the approach that we took with the pitching staff this year and just like, look how that worked out.
I don't think I don't think it's quite the same thing because I think you have you have Urias and you have Mateo, and I feel comfortable that even if their production isn't great, that they are passable major league infielders, and then you have enough guys around them that you can find, whether it be a second baseman or a third baseman and a utility guy and someone else probably who could play the infield, when needed, or on occasion. So yeah, I think it's very, and then also the risk too is a lot different, right? I mean, if you don't go into the year with enough pitchers, I mean, the whole starting staff, that has so many ripple effects for the bullpen. It just can, as we just saw, it can ruin a season. I mean, worst case scenario, with a bad infield, you're not going to help the pitchers out, which isn't good. But the biggest problem, based on who our middle infielders are, is we're going to have a couple voids in the lineup, and that's not something the Orioles, I don't think, feel like they can't or won't try to work around. So,
well, my thing with the infield is that while I think they have a lot of interesting infield options, like I like Urias, I like Mateo, at least what I saw from him, I'm not so sure they have an everyday major league shortstop on the roster. Like Urias did the job, but I think he's probably more comfortable at second or third. Mateo, I don't think, is a shortstop. Martin does not hit enough to be a major league player. Rylan Bannon's not a shortstop. Jahmai Jones is not a shortstop. I think there's not a shortstop on the roster, really. So my preference would be to get a shortstop of some kind. And that's, then you can have somebody, Bannon, somebody, I don't know. You have people at AAA too that you can learn about them down there. I think Urias is a starter on this team next year. I don't know if it's at second or third base, but I just don't think he's the everyday shortstop. I could be wrong about that. He played fine at shortstop. He just also, when he had like leg issues, Brandon Hyde put him in the lineup and be like, yeah, he can't handle shortstop, but he can handle second base. Like, I don't know. That seemed like kind of weird too. I know shortstop is like a farther throw. There's a little more balls get hit over there, all that stuff. But that just kind of tells me, he wants to play second base, or he's just more comfortable there. And so let's just have him play second base. He's earned it. He's hit enough. Let's just do that and go find a shortstop for this team.
Fair.
But yeah, so those are sort of the 40-man guy. The point of that exercise was just to show that, like, while the roster is close to full, they probably can find like 5 or 6 more spots if they really want to, make a trade or to protect some guys from the Rule 5 draft, which we're going to get to in just a second. So yeah, there's going to be a few spots open. There's going to be some roster turnover, as there is every offseason. So let's talk arbitration. The Orioles, these are all players that the Orioles could offer a contract to, and then they have to either go to arbitration or agree to a deal with them prior to the arbitration hearing, or they can non-tender them and then they would become free agents. So this is the full list. Trey Mancini, Pedro Severino, Pavlica was on here, although he was just outrighted, so that's been taken care of. Anthony Santander, Paul Fry, Jorge Lopez, Tanner Scott, John Means, and that is it. So are there any guys on here, apart from Valaika, because we kind of know the story there, that you view as non-tender candidates or the most likely to be non-tendered? Eli, do you want to go first?
Yeah, I think that Severino's name is definitely up there. He's projected, and these projections come from MLB Trade Rumors. They do a really good job. If you ever want more, just more information on how arbitration works, more information, like they run numbers and give these projections every year for every player that's eligible for arbitration. Just a great resource, MLB Trade Rumors. But they project him to earn $3.1 million based on his track record and based on his performance last year. And, we know that Adley is knocking at the door. We know he's coming up, assuming service time rules stay the same under the next CBA. We know he's coming up early in the year after that service time cutoff for the full season passes by. So, $3 million for a backup catcher is expensive. And there's no reason for us to pay that. There's no reason to keep him around. There are guys like a Manny Pena and other, other catchers that will go for lower rates. We'll be just fine behind the dish for a couple of weeks, and then we'll be happy to assume a backup role as soon as Adley comes up. So I think Severino is really the obvious one. The other one that we listed here was Jorge Lopez, but we kind of talked about this with his whole bullpen experiment. We're not quite sure what we have there in terms of what he could be as a bullpenner. And I still kind of like the thought of him in that role, and he's only projected to earn $1.5 million. So I think that's a reasonable rate for a serviceable arm in the bullpen. Yeah, I expect us to tender him that contract.
Okay. Yeah, I think that lines up. I've got one other name I might mention, but Jesse, I'm here. I'm interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, the only other name that I would possibly mention is Tanner Scott. But I think there's too much upside for the Orioles to do that. I think that they're going to end up keeping him.
See, I was going to go Paul Fry as the other name.
My thing about Fry is that there's, again, kind of the same situation. There's too much upside. There's the potential for him to be dealt at a certain point. Yeah, he had some rough stretches this previous year, but I think the team control and the possibility for the trade chip, I think the Orioles will definitely be keeping him.
Right. Now I agree with you on that. I've seen people that are kind of ready to cut bait on Paul Fry, and maybe we're at that point, but this reminds me of last year the Orioles had signed that White Sox second baseman. I can't remember his name now.
Yolmer Sanchez. Yeah.
Where they did this, where they tendered him, I believe, and signed him, and then they cut him before the season. And then we discovered that they didn't have to pay his full salary because they cut him before opening day. Paul Fry could be that kind of a situation where offer him arbitration. It's $1 million. It's not going to kill the Orioles to do that. Bring him into spring training and see if he's still got whatever was ailing him, because he went down to AAA and was getting rocked down in AAA too. So something was going on there, but I think Paul Fry has enough of a track record that you offer him the deal, bring him to Sarasota, and see if he's still getting lit up or has lost whatever it was that made him good.
If the Orioles non-tender him, that will make us not trading him at the previous deadline like that much more infuriating, because I don't know what the offers were, but there was something, and whatever, right, teams offered us was definitely more valuable than being in this situation that we're in if we actually don't non-tender him. But if we do, then that would speak really badly to Elias, basically.
Oh yeah, it already seems like a miscalculation, but I don't know. Relievers are volatile, but the way he fell off so severely and the way it coincided with the banning of the sticky stuff, I'm wondering if there's something going on there.
I think it was a little bit after that. He only fell off in the last month and a half of the season.
I don't think so. Let me look up his game logs, because I could have sworn it was almost identical to when sticky stuff got.
The other thing I was going to say is Paul Fry is pretty notorious for having some really bad stretches. He also started the season really badly. So, yeah, that's just kind of how he is, I think, as a reliever.
Yeah. You're right. And remember, I think we talked the very first week of the season, he was really bad or something. And we were like, what's going on? And then he figured it out and was good. So June 21st, I think, was the sticky stuff. And on June 18th, he had a 1.78 ERA. Then he gave up 4 runs on June 19th.
So in July, the OPS against him was a 301, for the full month after.
Yeah, so that was a good month. Yeah, he had a good
And
month.
then in August, it was a 1284.
That's true.
Yeah, there was a good delay in there.
Yeah, he was bad the second half of June, then had a good July, and then was just a disaster in August.
Right. Yeah, I don't know. It could have played a factor, and maybe it just made him less consistent, if nothing else. There are any number of things that could have happened. But yeah, I agree that given his track record, he was good for a full 2.5 seasons before this year. and moderately good, a
Mhm.
definitely serviceable bullpen arm that was worth $1 million, and he fell off really, really hard for a month. That says to me, like, let the dude calm down and try to figure it out for an off season. Like, there's probably something valuable in his arm, and even if it takes him a little bit of time in the minor leagues next year to fully get himself right and then come up, you've still got 2.5 years of control over him.
Yeah, and plus, like, these are, while MLB Trade Rumors does a really good job with these estimates, they are only estimates. The team and the Orioles are really good at winning these arbitration battles with players. I think they've only lost like 2 or something in the whole history of it.
Which is not a pat on the back to the
No.
Orioles. It means they're cold and calculating and like do anything they can. And so I should say the arbitration process as a whole, there's a reason that it's one of the things really like up for debate in this upcoming CBA, because it severely, severely undervalues players. And the teams, I mean, players go in there and they say it's the most demoralizing process because the teams come in and all they're trying to do is show why you are not actually a good player and are not worth X amount of money. And they just attack you and attack you. Mm-hmm. And then they're like, all right, come on, let's start the season. So
famously, this caused a big rift between Dellin Betances and the Yankees, right?
That's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yeah, and what's he doing now?
Oh. It's with the Mets.
Yeah, which is purgatory essentially.
For sure.
But yeah, no, Eli makes a good point. It's not a pat on the back, but it is to say that, if some fans do get like in the owner's pocketbook and be like, oh, well, 1.5 million for Jorge Lopez, like that's a lot. Like, it's not your money. Just pay Jorge Lopez $1.5 million. But also know that, like, if you're that type of a fan, the Orioles could potentially pay him $1.2 million next year. Like, these estimates are not set in stone. They're just a guess. And they're probably going to be a little bit off this year if the CBA changes this process in any meaningful way. But yeah, I think we all are in agreement there. Non-tender Severino, Vallejo will be non-tendered or whatever, that he was outrighted, so he's not going to get a contract, I don't think, for next year. And then tender everybody else, and let's see how it goes. All right, next thing, let's talk more 40-man roster stuff. There are a bunch of players that need to be added to the 40-man roster in order to be protected from the Rule 5 draft. There are multiple phases of the Rule 5 draft. The Major League phase, a player has to be on your Major League 40-man roster in order to be protected. And then that player, if selected, has to stay on your Major League 26-man roster for the entire season. There's also the minor league phase, which to be protected from that, you have to be on a team's AAA roster. And then you have to, they just basically have to keep you the next season. You don't have to really stay on any certain roster the following year. But yeah, that all in mind, the Orioles have a bunch of players that need to be protected. The most noteworthy one is DL Hall, but some other guys that you may be familiar with are Kyle Bradish, Kevin Smith, Blaine Knight, Cody Sedlock, former first-round pick, Terran Vavra, one of the guys the Orioles got from the Rockies. Brett Cumberland is one of the players they got in the Kevin Gossman trade. And then Robert Newstrom was a draft pick a couple of years ago. Are there any players in particular that you think the Orioles need to really protect from the Rule 5 draft? Eli, it looks like you've highlighted a few players here.
Yeah, I highlighted a couple. I think that, of the guys you listed, obviously DL Hall will get taken. I think Bradish had enough of a breakout to the point where he would be taken. He, did get some AAA experience. Kevin Smith is kind of borderline just because, he's not usually in the Rule 5 draft, people are looking for stuff, and Kevin Smith is not that. Usually you're looking for a Tyler Wells who throws, 98 miles an hour when he needs to. And you kind of decide that you can work with it if you can just get him through this season. And like Kevin Smith being such a soft thrower, I don't really see him being that much of a risk. I think that Robert Newstrom actually could get some looks. He definitely kind of had a breakout in terms of power this year. He, like, famously hit the 470 some foot home run this year. And he's definitely got some pop. Vavra, I think, definitely needs to be protected. We got him in one of the Rockies trades, I think the Givens trade. And so, like we definitely do have some guys that I think would be at least getting looks. There's always some unpredictability. People put out lists of the top Rule 5 draft prospects, and every single year, the top one has like a 50% chance of actually getting taken in that draft. There's always some hit or miss as to the way the teams are actually evaluating these guys. But, just by the way that the Orioles have handled them, I think the guys that you mentioned definitely are at least valued by the Orioles to the extent that they would want to add them to the 40-man roster.
Yeah, and it should be noted that Brett Cumberland was Rule 5 eligible last year and did not get picked. Gray Venter was Rule 5 eligible last year, did get picked, then got returned. Who was the guy? Zach Pop got picked by, I forget who picked him, but then they traded him to the Marlins. Well, yeah, somebody picked him and then traded him. Yeah, I can't remember who picked him originally.
I think it was the Diamondbacks.
Okay, yeah, that sounds right. Cody Sedlock, I think, was eligible last year, did not get picked. So yeah, I don't know. Jess, do you have any guys in particular you really want the Orioles to save a spot on the 40-man for?
I mean, of course, Hall, but I was going to also say Vavra. I think that there's, I think there would be a good a decent enough chance that he would get selected, and I think the Orioles should be able to find room on the roster for him. So definitely.
Yeah, I wanted to point out 4 other names that need to be protected. They are 4 guys that are currently on they're in the Arizona Fall League right now. So I think it kind of shows you the Orioles want to take a look at them a little bit. It's Nick Vespi, Logan Gillespie, Cameron Bishop, and Connor Loprick. So now, there's multiple ways to look at this. None of these guys are like highly sought after. They're pitchers, they're, relief pitcher types that I think the Orioles, either they want to get a better look at, or they want to maybe feature them for other teams that could be interested in adding them to their 40-man roster. But they're names that you probably aren't super familiar with, but these are the types of names that I think, like Eli was just talking about, that like could be good picks for a team that like need a bullpen arm. These could be the guys that are like the Max Scruller of this year, who did not go well, clearly, but the Orioles picked him because he had a particular pitch or whatever that they found interesting, and they thought they could work with it and make him into something a little bit more than he seemed to be with the Reds. Didn't work out, but these are guys that you could potentially see maybe available if the Orioles do not protect them. And then another name I wanted to mention was Ignacio Feliz. So this guy only pitched at high A Aberdeen this year. He also pitched with Delmarva, I think, and he was like ridiculously good for Delmarva. Had a 1.05 ERA over 43 innings. Got lit up a little bit at Aberdeen when he jumped up over 9 games. But this was a guy the Orioles selected in the minor leagues phase of the Rule 5 draft last year. So again, they would have to protect him by putting him on Norfolk's roster. So that's another one that you may see him get plucked because he's an interesting enough arm, has some deception to his game, and I could see another team taking him if the Orioles don't decide to protect him. But yeah, I think I agree with all the names you guys mentioned. Adam Hall is one that I'm kind of intrigued on because he's a guy that's ranked really high in a lot of I think Keith Law really likes Adam Hall. He kind of had a tough season this year. He's kind of an interesting story. Like, he's a Canadian guy who his parents like purposely moved him so that he could play like full season baseball. And then I think last year, the year before, his father like had cancer and passed away. And it's like a lot of stuff there. But he's a guy that's got a lot of tools, very fast. I think a lot of people view him as like the fastest guy in the Orioles minor league system, but had a tough year. I don't know. What do you guys think about Adam Hall, or do you know anything about Adam Hall to really have like an opinion on what the Orioles should do there?
Yeah, he's definitely the kind of, I don't know. I think he didn't hit enough to be at risk. And that's kind of always been the question mark around him. And so like, I think you're probably still safe if you leave him off. But I also think that he's somebody you want to keep in the system, particularly, he is an infielder and does have kind of those baseline tools, like the speed, like the glove, that can't really be taken away from you, you know, so he has a good baseline of overall value as a result of that. But like you said, I think he's had, or I know he had a pretty tough year. And so I don't necessarily see him as a risk for being taken. But at the same time, I think he's a valuable dude that you want in the system because, you know, I think there's a solid chance that he turns into a utility, like, you know, more back end, like platoon or utility guy off the bench. But there's a chance for him to become something.
Yeah, I just think the downside to adding him to Norfolk is not great enough as to why you wouldn't do it. So.
You're just saying to protect him from the minor league phase of it,
right? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's value. That's valid too. Yeah, we'll
I definitely can see him going up to Norfolk, but I do think it would start to get a bit crowded there because I think that I think Westberg might start the season there next year. I don't know. We'll see. But it might start to get a little bit crowded. I know Joey Ortiz, assuming he comes back healthy, he'll probably start in Bowie, but might be knocking on the door of AAA as well.
Yeah, and Kaden Grenier is another one that moved up to Norfolk at the very end of the year. He was like a high draft pick of Duquette. Has really struggled offensively, but is kind of viewed as like a really good fielder in the middle infield, which is nice to have in the high minors, but he's got to hit better than he has to this point, which is not a lot. He's got a career 696 career OPS in the minors, which is tough. But yeah, I mean, the big ones, they'll protect Dio Hall, Kyle Bradish. I think Kevin Smith gets protected, and Taron Vavra and Brett Cumberland. Beyond that, I think it gets a little bit gray. Plus, the Orioles like to pick a guy in the Rule 5 draft, so you can't have an absolutely full 40-man going into it. So I think like if they protect like 5 guys, I think that's about the max. We'll see if they go beyond that. All right, let's talk trading block. Jesse alluded to some of this a little earlier, so I'm interested to hear what his hot take is on a potential trade chip. But the Orioles trading block, you know, I don't think anybody's really protected here, save for maybe Ryan Mountcastle and Cedric Mullins. I think just about anybody else could be available. Some of the big names would be Anthony Santander, John Means. I think Pedro Severino, they could maybe try to move if another team would be interested there at $3 million, although I think that could be a tough sell. And then DJ Stewart is another one that I think the Orioles need to make a move on one of the corner outfielders. But Jess, I'm gonna throw it to you because you have an opinion here on a move they could potentially make.
Well, yeah, I mean, as far as the Severino, I don't think it's as outlandish as maybe, you know, you might think. Not that you think it's outlandish, but, you know, just I would just point to his track record as to why a team might be willing to do something like that. But I think the big one here for me, I definitely don't see Means or Santander going, but I could see DJ Stewart getting dealt. I could see another team being like, you know, we like that this guy hits. Yes, he doesn't play defense. Yes, you know, yes, there's a lot of downsides and a lot of holes in his game. He's definitely not a 5-tool player, but this is a guy that we think can hit. And you know, if we just give him a different approach at the plate, you know, we have him, you know, have this mentality when he gets up there, he can perform, and we could turn him into a pretty good hitter. So I could see a deal, and I don't think the Orioles asking price for him is going to be enormous. I don't know why it would be. So I could see someone like DJ Stewart getting dealt this offseason.
Okay. Yeah, I think I agree with that. And what I would also say is like we should be prepared that if he does get traded, the return for him is going to be very little.
It's not going to be a blockbuster deal.
No. Eli, do you think like a DJ Stewart deal could make some sense?
I think it makes sense for us. I don't think it makes sense for any other team. I think that in all seriousness, I think that DJ Stewart is one of the guys who gets cut loose this offseason. I think that the Orioles just haven't seen enough. And I think we've got, like, you know, Kyle Stowers is knocking on the door. We just talked about Robert Newstrom. Like, there are too many outfield prospects, and DJ Stewart, and like we've talked about the Mountcastle and Mancini first base DH situation. So, like you can't really get DJ Stewart that many at bats at DH. You have Yusniel Diaz who needs to come up as well. He needs to get a shot. Like I think there's just no space, and DJ Stewart is like not going to get tendered a contract by the Orioles. And so, I think he's a non-tender, and I think that other teams recognize that. I mean, like we couldn't trade him until we tendered him a contract anyways, technically. But I don't think that teams, I guess then I don't think it'll ever get that far to the point where we could trade him. I think he'll be non-tendered, and as a result, I think some team will pick him up and they'll try to use him as use him in the ways that we would have loved to have used him, but we just don't have space or time to be messing around with it and like waiting for him anymore.
Interesting. So you think they're going to non-tender him, even though I think they just would have to offer him like the minimum, right? Because he's not arbitration eligible yet.
Right. Yeah, he's had he's like just over 2 years of service time. And so they would not need to, it's not arbitration. It would be like the league minimum, or I think there's some rule. It has to be like 80% at least of their salary from the previous year. But I just can't see it. Like I think the Orioles are too busy, and like we were talking about the infield getting crowded. So maybe a Mateo and a Jahmai Jones start getting some corner outfield at bats. There's just too much happening for us to be playing around with DJ Stewart anymore in my mind.
Okay. I mean, what sticks in my head is just like how often, like, I don't know, he seems like one of Brandon Hyde's guys. Like he'll put him at the cleanup spot some weeks, like every single day. Not that that makes a whole lot of sense. And yes, he cannot field, but I just don't know if they're ready to like give up on him. I think they might be able to talk themselves into a trade that makes sense for the team to get, some sort of bullpen arm. I think maybe I could see a team being like, hey, we'll take DJ Stewart if you take like this mediocre relief pitcher that we don't want anymore. Like I could see some kind of a deal like that. Because I do think a trade could make sense. But yeah, I just think they seem to like his power potential too much and his like 3 true outcomes sort of profile a lot. That I don't know if they're just going to drop him, but whatever happens, it's probably not the biggest deal.
Yeah. He's been here in like parts of 3 seasons now, I think. So I'm just kind of like, how long are we going to wait for this to happen? We've seen some good stuff, but we've also seen so much bad stuff that I could see it being a situation where the Orioles tender him and then like immediately start trying to dish him out. I think it's possible that happens, but I don't see a situation where the Orioles break camp with DJ Stewart. Yeah.
What's his role on the major league team going to be? Like,
right.
I mean, he barely had a role this year.
Well, but what I would say though is that, you're talking about trading him. Every team is going to have the DH next year. Like that's not official, but it is official. You know what I mean? So like the NL, there's about to be 15 more DH jobs. And I think
so that helps the market for him. You're saying,
yeah, right. It does. That's true.
And one name, so kind of unrelated to DJ Stewart, but a name we haven't really talked about in the trade wins yet is Trey Mancini. I mean, we talked about how there could be an extension going on there. I know we're all not super into that. I think like it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. We'd have to see the dollars and cents and all that stuff. But, just as likely, I think, could be a trade for Trey Mancini.
I think it's more likely.
Okay. So
I think it's more likely this offseason.
Do you think he will get traded this offseason?
No. But I think it's more but I think it's more likely than him getting extended this offseason.
Yeah. The extension thing is tough for me to believe. Like, I love Trey. I think he's a great guy, and I would be like, it'd be awesome to have him in an Orioles uniform long term, but I just don't think that I see that he's like a Mike Elias type to keep around long term.
Yeah. And the obstacle for me to a trade is that Trey Mancini had a 104 OPS plus this past season.
Right.
And for a first base and a DH type, that just doesn't cut it.
Right.
And like, overall, I think Trey Mancini is a good player, and I think chances are next year is better. After having a full year, getting back in the swing of things, like I'm sure, there is a 0% chance this isn't true in my mind. I'm sure that like his body wore down, as the season went on. We saw it. There was, his little injury at the end of the year that he didn't want to go on the IL for. Like, I don't think that there's any way that next year isn't better for him. I think that he's going to be a better player next year than he was this year. But I don't think there's any team that's going to give up anything substantial for somebody coming off of like a season as a first base and DH where you were only 4% better than the league average hitter. And I think that as a result of that, like the Orioles cannot trade Trey Mancini for like a bag of balls. That like they have to get something significant in return for him.
The fans would be mad.
Right. The fans would
we traded him for nothing.
And yeah, so I can't see Michael Elias doing that. Right. And as a result, I can't see a Trey Mancini trade coming together because he means more to the Orioles than he would to any other team on like in the MLB.
Right. No, that makes sense. The other thing I was going to say is, and I definitely agree with what you're saying here, but similar to the DJ Stewart conversation, the universal DH is applicable for Mancini's trade market. So that might have some influence too.
That's true.
Right. And I think this is one of those situations where you could say like, all right, Trey's coming off of a season in which he didn't hit great, but he could come back next year stronger. I think you could make him the DH more often than you did this year, even where Mountcastle was kind of working in there. And you could see him have an OPS plus of like 115. And then you go, all right, here's your rent-a-bat. Like any team in the league, Trey Mancini is going to upgrade your team because he can play first base. He can be your DH. Give us one of your top 15 prospects. I think that's totally realistic. Whereas right now, I don't know how realistic that is.
I fully agree with that.
And then you can kind of send him out in a little bit better, grander way, I guess. Like he's on top of his game. We're sending him to a competitor to go win a World Series. Like, love you, Trey.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Everybody, it's kind of better for all parties involved. Yeah.
All right. Well, I think that's the trading. I mesean, is there any other potential trades we're seeing? Anthony Santander, I think I agree with you, Jesse. I don't think he's getting traded. Pedro Severino, I kind of said my piece there. DJ Stewart, we talked about that. John Means.
I think it's selling low on Means, so I don't think that's going to happen.
And the Orioles need pitching. Like, obviously you want to make something on that, but like we need a pitcher that can get out major league hitters, and he's about the only one we've got right now.
Yeah, his projected arbitration salary is just $3 million.
Right.
Like for a major league caliber arm, that's dirt cheap. So the Orioles will be more than happy to pay him that.
Yeah, I agree.
And keep him. Yeah.
I was going to say the question is the trade, though.
No, I said keep him. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, I agree. I think Means sticks around. He's another one that if he lights it up the beginning of next year, I think the deadline he starts to get some heat on him, but we'll see. And then any of the bullpen arms, do you think like any of those guys? Eli kind of talked about Cole Sulser earlier in the episode.
Yeah, I think Sulser is an interesting question because, theoretically for the Orioles, if you're going to be competing and like competing hard in 2 or 3 years, then, like the 30-31 that Sulser is now becomes a 32-33 or maybe even 34. And so then, there might be a substantial drop off in how well he's performing. And, we talk about the volatility of relievers all the time. So, there's no assurances one way or another, but like as a dude who just is older and is contributing at a high level right now, I think he does make sense as a trade candidate. And I mean, I think there are 4 years of control over him. So some team might take a gamble, assuming he'll maintain that for the last 2 years. And if not, you non-tender him and you don't need to pay him. I mean, it's like, these guys who are pre-free agency are the greatest thing for teams because they can just, they have a club option every single year. They could just say, no, we're not going to pay you next year. And that's it. Like the guy goes away. But if you want to keep him, you get him at these discounted salaries as a result of the arbitration process and the pre-arb process. So like Sulser, some team will take a gamble, assuming he's going to be really good next year, getting paid about the league minimum. And then the year after that, then he'll hit arbitration, might make $1 million, will probably still be really good. And then the next 2 years, even that year, if you don't want to pay him, you don't have to pay him. So he's a super valuable guy, I think, as far as relievers go.
I agree with you, Eli. I was just gonna Tanner Scott is also on my radar. Most of the time, we've had this conversation before, bullpen arms get moved kind of at, toward the middle of the year, just because teams don't know how their bullpen is going to shake out. And, so we're not going to pay a lot for a reliever. However, in this situation for Tanner Scott, I could see a team being like, okay, the Orioles asking price on him, I think, will not be that large. And I could see a team being like, okay, his market to me makes sense more in the offseason, just because I think it makes sense for a team to be like, look, this guy has great stuff. He throws 100 miles an hour. Give us an offseason. Give us training camp. Give us, spring training to work with him. Let's get our staff on top of him. And let's give them like enough time and a few weeks to really tamper and mess with stuff to see if we can figure this guy out. At the deadline, right, you're getting a guy to go win, right? But there are plenty of teams where I feel like, they're going to be like, we could use this extra lefty in our bullpen. We can, basically rely on him to be a presence in our bullpen, for the vast majority of the year. And hopefully, we're going to use our pitching staff and our coaches, and we're going to turn this guy hopefully into something really good. And worst case scenario, we can just cut ties with him or, figure something out.
But I think then the Orioles kind of say the exact same thing about him. And, the Orioles trading him as a reclamation project, they're going to get almost nothing back for him versus them just keeping him and being like, well, maybe this is our meal ticket right here. Like turn this guy that can throw 100 miles an hour into an elite reliever.
I think
except the Orioles have had a chance to do that and they haven't, whereas another team has not had that opportunity yet.
But then you're still selling low, and Tanner Scott in his current form might be more valuable than what you get back.
And Tanner Scott in his current form is still a major league reliever on this team. Like the Orioles, he's in the bullpen next year.
Definitely.
So I don't know. I don't see that happening. Again, you just talked about it. He could be a guy on the move in the middle of the year, but I don't see it happening in the offseason while the Orioles are trying to assemble a bullpen. He's one of the pieces that is going to be there. So it's tough to take that now. Whereas I think once you get into the season, it might be a little bit easier. All right. The Orioles do have a few free agents of their own. Matt Harvey, Fernando Abad, and then also two guys that have already been they're already free agents is Adam Plutko and Cesar Valdez. Any chance the Orioles bring any of those guys back?
Nope.
Matt Harvey.
Wow. Okay.
I could see Matt Harvey. Yeah.
Really?
I think we talked about this before, but I could definitely see the Orioles, an invite to spring training. I could see that.
Oh, right. This was when Tyler asked if Matt Harvey was the new Wade LeBlanc. That's what it was.
I think so.
Just bring him back here. No, I think
I could definitely see him being that. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not sure what other team he's going to go to right now and start on. I'm not sure he's going to start on the 2022 Orioles either. I would hope they get to a point that they don't think that's going to happen, but I could see him getting a minor league deal with a $1 million salary or whatever if he comes back just like he did this year and say, hey Matt, we need the innings, dude. You want to come and give it a go? And sure, let's try it out. But as far as the other three, probably not. Plutko was amazing early in the year and then completely fell apart. And Cesar Valdez, he's got one pitch and it got figured out, So I don't think they bring any of those other three back.
I agree. I think there's less than a 0.03% chance that any of those guys comes back.
You're leaving yourself a little wiggle room.
Yeah.
I was going to say.
Because Cesar Valdez might come back on a minor league deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
maybe.
And I could even see Plutko too. Like that's not beyond the realm of possibility in my mind.
I don't think so.
I mean, it's possible. Of course, it's
What?
possible.
I guess I just don't see why not. It's going to be a very cheap investment. It's going to be virtually no skin off the Orioles' back, and it's another guy to be in the mix.
Right, but the Orioles have all the guys that we had last year, plus some new ones coming up, like the Bradishes, the Bronoviches, the Kevin Smiths, like all these AAA pitchers last year. And like Mike Bauman's going to be around all year. He was not here when Adam Plutko was pitching. I think all of these guys are going to need innings in ways that, they didn't with like when Adam Plutko was on the team. And so we have more and more people. And I think that Plutko showed enough this year that he would not be willing to take a fully minor league deal, which I think is the only, I don't know. I don't think he'll take a non-guaranteed deal. I think he'll sign on for cheap with a team that like is happy to stash him as a long man or a bullpen guy.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, this past year was like the worst year of his career. He's been like a steady guy with Cleveland, so he'll get a deal somewhere. I don't know if it's going to be guaranteed though. I have some doubts about that.
He just doesn't feel like the right fit for the Orioles. Like at this point in his career, he's trying to lock onto something more solid, and the Orioles I think won't have as many innings for him next year as they did this year.
I think that's valid. All right, well, let's talk about free agents they might get, or theoretically, although none of us think they're going to really spend a lot of money. We talked about shortstop a little bit, like that as a need for the Orioles long term. There's a very healthy, bountiful class of free agent shortstops this winter, and I can just kind of read off some of the big names. It's Carlos Correa, Trevor Story, Corey Seager, Javi Baez, and then there's a bit of a drop off. And then we got Jose Iglesias, Freddie Galvis, Angelton Simmons, and Andrew Romine.
Hey, don't forget Marcus Semien. Yeah,
Marcus Semien. On here, he's listed as a second baseman, I believe. So that's why I missed him.
Okay. He played second base for the Blue Jays.
Yeah, Bo Bichette was at short.
Yeah, but he played short in the previous 2 years.
Oh, for sure. Right. No, I think he can play shortstop again. I'm just saying this MLB.com had him listed as a second baseman. So
yeah, gotcha.
Yeah, so that's kind of what we got going on at shortstop. A lot of people online are very excited about Carlos Correa and his, tenuous connection to Mike Elias. So what do we think? Are the Orioles going to sign one of these big name shortstops? Jesse?
Look, here's what I'll say. No, but what I
here's what I'll say. No.
All right, that's the end of the podcast, folks.
What I think the Orioles might publicly kind of pretend to be interested in Carlos Correa to get the fans excited and stuff. They might be in the mix. They might even offer him a contract. I will say that.
Wow.
But listen to what I'm saying. But if they were to offer him a contract, it wouldn't be anywhere near the asking price that he is asking for. It wouldn't be a realistic offer, right? So I think
then why offer what?
I think the Orioles might try to show their fan base that we want, we're interested in him.
Just a publicity stunt.
Correct. Yeah. But I think
that's dicey.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But no, but I think there's no realistic chance that Carlos Correa ends up with the Orioles at all.
No, Carlos Correa's like, I don't know, his performance in this postseason and throughout the course of the year, he finally like put together over 600 at bats. He's going to make himself probably $300 million.
Right.
The Orioles are not even like pretending to, even for a publicity stunt. There's just no way.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't know. Like,
I know what you're saying, and
I can see a Ken Rosenthal tweet coming where they say like Orioles are kicking the tires on free agent shortstop Carlos Correa. Like I can see that tweet coming.
Right.
They're doing their due diligence on free agent shortstop Carlos Correa.
Right. Exactly. The thing is, like, the thing you really got to think about though is these cheap Orioles, would never ever pay the amount of money that is required to get Carlos Correa. Right. I mean,
revving people up.
That's at least what I think. Like, you're gonna, let alone how much you would have to overpay him to have him come to Baltimore, right? This is a guy that has massive postseason experience who is trying to win the World Series. You would have to pay him so much more to come to the Orioles, I think, than what his value is. That's what
we could be talking about a player that has 2 World Series rings by the time free agency hits, and you're offering him like, hey, you come here and you like are building something. I'm not saying, I don't think you got to, what I'm saying is not that it's likely he comes, but I don't think you've got to give him like some bonus to come to Baltimore versus somewhere else. Like, I think he's going to go wherever the most money is regardless. And if that's New York, he's going to go to New York. If that's Houston, he's going to go back to Houston. I don't think it's going to be like, oh, well, the Orioles have to offer me another 10 mil for me to go to Baltimore. Like, no, I think it's straight up, you got to offer me the most money, but it's not because you're Baltimore. It's because I want the most money.
No, I think you would probably go for, yeah. No, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
But if we offer him the same contract that the Los Angeles Dodgers do,
right, he's going to the
he's not coming with the Orioles. We do have to offer him the most money. I think
even if we offer him, even if we offer him, if we offer him more than like $1 million more than LA, he's probably going to go to LA. But
the Players Association also gets involved in those things, and they don't like it when players go somewhere that offered them less money.
That's true. They want them to maximize their deals.
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying, though. I hear what you're saying.
Yeah.
But so like, Correa aside, are there any of these like big name shortstops that the Orioles could like realistically get involved with? Like, there's only so many to go around. And, there are other teams that have good shortstops already that are probably not going to be involved. The Mets have Lindor. The Dodgers have Trey Turner, who's probably going to go back to shortstop if Seager doesn't come back, which seems likely.
But Trey Turner's a free agent.
No, Trey Turner's a free agent next year.
Oh, that's my bad. You're right.
Yeah.
Okay.
I guess the thing I feel like is that out of all the shortstops that are available, like, these are all veterans. So they're all veterans. So
that's typically what's available in free agency, Jesse.
Yeah, but I'm saying, none of these guys are gonna like make sense for the long term, right? So any of these guys would be stopped.
Correa's like 27.
Yeah.
Yeah, right. Yeah. So no.
So he'll be a very good player.
I meant to say other than Correa. Yeah.
No, a bunch of these guys are young. Corey Seager's 27.
Trevor Story's only 29. Javi's only 29.
Yeah, Javi's 29.
I'm sorry. Yeah. Nobody out of our price range.
Look, in a perfect world, the Orioles could go get a 22-year-old who's going to be a stud, but that doesn't happen all the time. I think that's why this is the Yankees haven't been able to find a shortstop since Derek Jeter left. Like, Didi Gregorius was decent, but like Gleyber Torres is a good hitter, but he's not a good fielder. Like, that it's hard to find the guy at shortstop for a long time,
For sure.
And
he had the guy. Yeah.
I think that if we sign a shortstop, I think it's highly, highly likely that it is either Freddie Galvis or Jose Iglesias again. I'm like not even kidding.
No, I agree.
I think both of them are in our price range. Iglesias, I don't know. Iglesias didn't hit well this year. He didn't hit the 375 that he hit in 2020. And I don't know.
What about Simmons?
And Jones Simmons, he's fine too. One of these guys who's a glove first and just kind of will, be a stabilizing force as we're swapping out all these infielders that we've been talking about.
But Simmons, his bat has really fallen. And I know you're going for a glove, but Jesus, he can't hit anymore.
Yeah. To me personally, that's why I kind of look at, I think we should, you kind of talk about where you're going to stabilize and where you're going to let people rotate around. And I think that we should stabilize third base just because third base was such a terrible spot for us this year and is more of an offensive position. And that's what I think we need. I think we need like the lineup stabilization more than we need the infield stabilization that a shortstop would provide. So I'm more personally like look at a third baseman and try to sign someone there.
Oh, so Chris Bryant.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely Chris Bryant.
Yeah. It's going to be tough. I don't know. Yeah. I think the Orioles getting a big time or even like a relevant's not fair. But like a big time everyday player is probably not going to happen via free agency.
Correct. Yeah. No, that's right.
All right. But pitching though, we do think they're going to get some pitchers. And Eli, you've previously mentioned Martin Perez, but then you realize he's got a club option. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a club option, but it is like a $6 million club option, which seems honestly kind of high for him.
Mm-hmm.
So, they might cut him loose, and I'm okay with that. And like my prediction stays a possibility, but in the contingency that Martin Perez's option is picked up, I would like to switch my prediction to a Jordan Lyles, who had a 5.15 ERA this year, but through 180 innings. And that's the kind of guy I think the Orioles are in the market for.
Okay, that sounds possible. And you think they would just get one guy like that, or you think they would try to get like two?
I think one guy that throws that many innings.
Yeah, maybe one and a Harvey.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe something like that. Like one and a non-guaranteed minor league deal that we'll see how it works out.
Okay.
I was looking at someone like Michael Wacha. He threw 124 innings last year.
With the Rays, right?
Yeah, exactly. He's had some injury issues, before that, but earlier in his career, he threw 181 and 165 innings. So, yeah. I mean, that was a while ago. But I'd like Michael Wacha.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'm looking at the names you guys are spitting out. Jordan Lyles had a negative 0.2 B WAR last year. Michael Wacha had a negative 0.7 B WAR last year. I'm looking at Zach Davies, who had a negative 0.9 B WAR last year. Although, again, he threw 148 innings, so kind of in the same vein. And the Orioles drafted Zach Davies, although it was a decade ago, so I doubt they have too much of a book on him anymore. But I think we're all kind of saying the same thing. Like, they need a guy that's going to be cheap, maybe looking to, figure some stuff out for 1 year while also being given an opportunity to do so. And, you're not really going to be able to do that on a good team with a lot of pitching. So the Orioles are a good landing spot for a guy that has a track record, but maybe struggled recently and is looking for a 1 year stop to, add some value back to his name.
And there are a lot of other guys like that too. I mean, like Ivan Nova is someone I was looking at, Julio Teheran. But the thing about them is, they did not throw much innings last year at all. So, it's kind of more a situation where it's like an invite to spring training type.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean,
whereas Wacha would probably be like a guaranteed 1 year, 2 year deal or something.
Right. Yeah. I mean, as far as the reclamation, I like the Aaron Sanchez thing. I don't know if we said that on the pod, but Eli mentioned it, I think, before we recorded. I think that's another interesting one where he's always had really good stuff, but kind of has fallen on hard times. Andrew Heaney might be something kind of similar. He got rocked after he went to the Yankees, but it had always been like kind of a solid pitcher with the Angels, and he's lefty.
I just want to say, like, seeing Yankees fans freak out about the fact that Andrew Heaney was still starting for them, it just made me so happy. Yeah, and he was just unbelievably bad for them.
Yeah, absolutely atrocious. But that's kind of the vein of the type of player the Orioles are probably going to go sign this offseason. So don't get too excited.
And let me just say, that's if we're lucky, right? That's if things go really, really well, we're going to go get a Jordan Lyles.
I don't think that's accurate to say. Really, really well to get a Jordan Lyles.
Yeah, because the other option is the Orioles just do nothing and sign Hunter Harvey or Matt Harvey. Yeah. and the Orioles just sign them and try to do the same thing we did this past year,
Yeah.
which that's entirely possible. I think the most hope Oriole fans can have for free agent signings for starting pitchers this year is a Jordan Lyles. That would be an almost dream scenario. I'm serious. You're laughing, but I'm serious.
I don't think that should be a dream. I think that's like the baseline. Like the Orioles need to get reinforcements in the rotation, and that's fine. That should be the expectation, not necessarily like a dream scenario. But I hear what you're saying.
Yeah, the expectation has always been like the expectation has always just fallen on the floor the last couple of years. So
we have been
Jesse's given the realistic expectation.
Right.
We would love if the Orioles did this, I think. Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think we kind of covered all our bases on what we expect the Orioles to do this offseason. Is there anything else we need to talk about with the folks?
I don't think so.
All right, cool.
Enjoy the rest of the postseason, I guess.
Yeah, one thing I definitely am going to be looking into is if MLB.com ever figures it out and puts Cedric Mullins jerseys on the store. I don't know how it's possible. You said, Tyler, you actually said this. You said they predict, they try to predict who the jerseys are going to be and they just stock up for the season.
They're always like a year behind. Like, I used to work at a Target and I used to work at a Dick's Sporting Goods. And it's always like, they'll have a player that was good the previous year. Like, I think I shopped at Target this year and they had like Hanser Alberto jerseys early in the year.
Oh my God.
They're not jerseys, but like t-shirt jersey things. And it's so that like, they kind of do that. I noticed that the Ravens jerseys right now at Target are like J.K. Dobbins. So again, he's good, but he's been hurt and he's going to be out all year. So like they kind of do that where they sort of predict stuff. So I don't know if that is directly applicable to MLB.com itself. You would think they would be able to turn stuff around faster than like a retailer is, but apparently not.
Yeah, it's crazy.
But you'll have them next year.
So, yeah, well, I will get one next year. Also, he got married. Did you see that? Cedric Mullins got married. That was nice.
Huge shout out to Cedric Mullins. I know he listens.
Happy for him.
Yeah. He's a big Warehouse Pod guy.
Yeah, right.
But all right, I mean, so as far as the offseason goes with the podcast, we will record like when it's appropriate to do so, but this would get really dry to do every single week with very little Orioles news. So if anything big happens, we'll record. What, Eli?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I'm already out of material, so.
Yeah. So if something big happens, we'll definitely record. But usually what we try to do is like save up a couple good things, like a Rule 5 draft, an interesting trade, something else. And then we'll do a pod, like a quicker 30, 45 minute pod on that type of stuff. But if anything major happens, we will get together and record. So be on the lookout for that. But yeah, that is about it. I would say if you can, please support the podcast by subscribing and rating it on your various podcast applications and services. We appreciate that. We're also on YouTube. You can go over there and subscribe to us there. We just put the same audio version on there. And hopefully next year, we're going to try and sort out some video stuff so you can see our faces on every episode.
That might actually decrease the quality of the overall pod.
Well, we're
incorporating the faces.
That's all right. We'll find the true fans. We'll reduce the fan base down to the people that really, really love us. And then, yeah, follow us on all the social media at The Warehouse Pod and email the podcast, warehousepod@gmail.com. Eli, where are people finding you on the internet?
I'm on Twitter at Elijah Ginsburg. And obviously I tweet out all sorts of fun stuff from at The Warehouse Pod.
Nice. And
along with my other co-hosts.
Yes.
I'm on Twitter and Instagram at Juggernaut8678.
Nice. I'm on why did I say that twice? I'm on Instagram and Twitter at _Ty Young, and you can head over to CamdenChat.com to check out some blogs throughout the winter to warm your cold, dead Oriole loving heart. Yeah, that is about it.
That got really dark, Tyler.
Yeah, that's
dark.
That is how we do it. But all right, guys, that's all we got. Until next time, this has been the Warehouse Podcast. I'm Tyler.
I'm Jesse.
And I'm Eli.